the question I would bring you back to is, at the end of the day, always ask yourself, for what? What is the real purpose? And when you can connect to the pure intention of why you're doing the things that you're doing, it will save you from so much heartache and also suffering. So always come back to this question, for what? Because not all feedback is the same. So my question for you is, one, who do you go to? Secondly, is that source a reliable source? And is it the right person? So take time to reflect and let's be honest. Sometimes we need to put a pause, take a step back, take a deep breath, and also look at the success and the victories. So today's exercise is to identify what were your victories today and also what were victories that you can share from this week. And I just wanted to take a moment to check in.
Very big. And you can think of your employees as pawns in a bigger game. And if you lose a few, so be it. A challenge for anybody who's a military commander or a business leader is that they pay very little attention to what you say. They pay attention like a hawk to what you do. That's why the disengagement scores in business these days are dreadful. They're terrible. And I believe it's because senior managers are not listening to Sun Tzu and saying, each of my employees I need to treat as if they were members of your family, and they will be creative for you.
Their own interests and is trying to achieve their own ends. They are trying to do the best they can, given what they want. You're trying to do the best you can, given what you want, and so you're interacting in a strategic situation. Game theory is a mathematical theory that attempts to make sense of how it is that people interact in these strategic situations. It was originally developed in economics in order to try and understand economic behavior, like why people buy certain things or why they're willing to work for certain wages. But later on, it was expanded and applied to a variety of different situations, including biology, international relations, and even interpersonal relations like friendship and parenting and family relations.
You're losing money. You're leaving millions of dollars on the table. And over the course of a lifetime, that could be true for everybody. Tactically, emotional, intelligent negotiation is the way you make great deals and the way you have great long-term relationships. Sometimes they miss that and they think that the problem is the person across the table. And that's why oftentimes people think of it as conflict and actually treat it as conflict. Negotiation is really about what people are making decisions based on what they care about, what's your passions. Every decision you make based on what you care about, which I'm afraid that by definition that makes decision making an emotional process.
From the moment jam because you're giving a presentation and you think more clearly, or your focus is better, all sorts of aspects of that. The sorts of chronic stressors that most people deal with are just undeniably in the chronic range, like having spent the last 20 years daily traffic jams or abusive boss or some such thing. What you want to see is when it's the right amount of stress, it's what we call stimulation. And the basic curve there is here's an optimal level of stimulation, and too little, and function goes down with what we would call boredom, and too much, and function goes down with what we would call stress.
Experience, even if you were a brain in a vat, even if he were had a very impoverished experience, as long as he wasn't actually mentally defective, he could in principle refer to anything. There's a disagreement in a way that goes back to Plato and Aristotle. Because Plato holds the semantic omnipotence view, the view that in principle any mind has all the ideas within itself, just Socrates could bring them out, but they were really all there. Whereas Aristotle says, no, you can only have a concept, at least for the basic concepts, you can only have that concept if some instances actually occur in your experience from which you can extract that concept. The concepts aren't in you to start with.
Socrates is saying that to do philosophy is to rehearse for death. It is, in fact, to practice being dead. Why? Well, because being dead is having one's soul separate from the body, because you're not thinking about the here and now. If you're asking what's justice, anywhere, anytime, justice in itself, you're not asking who did me wrong now, yesterday. If you're asking what's beauty, you're not asking who is the most beautiful person in this room. And if you're not thinking about the here and now, then in the sense Plato's interested in, you're not here and now. You are where your mind is, not because you're in some other particular place, but a better one, but because you're not in place in that sense at all. You're immersed in generalities.
Just sort of theological stuff. God cannot sin. God cannot make a copy of himself. It's the third one that was just earth-shaking. Third, even God cannot make a triangle with more than 180 degrees. And in that one concept, Aquinas had just said, if it comes up against sort of the old knowledge and science, science wins. And that was an absolute landmark moment. This was the beginning of a transformation of the world.
It just happens they got interested in this thing and they learned all this stuff. They're just people. There's no talent, a special miracle ability to understand quantum mechanics or a miracle ability to to imagine electromagnetic fields that comes without practice and reading and learning and study. So if you say you take an ordinary person who's willing to devote a great deal of time and study and work and thinking and mathematics and timing, then he's become a scientist.
Answer is greed. And greed simply means this desire for more.
saying, yeah, having a really robust, studly frontal cortex may do you a lot of good there. It's the part of the brain that does impulse control, long-term planning, emotional regulation, does all the stuff where it's the frontal cortex that whispers in your ear saying, you really want to do that right now? I might not do that. You're going to regret it. It seems like a great idea. But when you do sort of the truly difficult thing, when you see people who are the ones who run into the burning building to save the child, and they're leaping to the river when everybody else is standing there like headless chickens. When you look at those people, they're not doing it because they've got the most amazing frontal cortexes on earth. They do it automatically. They do it automatically.
Whether or not that's strictly true, the unexamined life is certainly needlessly painful, both for oneself and for others. And painful or not, the unexamined life is certainly less interesting. We really spend our lives learning how to live. And this isn't necessarily as absurd or as tragic as it sounds. Most of us find a pattern of living that makes approximate sense, and we tinker with it for decades. If you're lucky, you'll discover that you can live more or less the way you want. But even if you are lucky, you'll find that it's possible to want the wrong things, to be lured into squandering your time and attention, to be bewitched in a way by things that don't really matter. Even if you're lucky, happiness can be surprisingly elusive. So why meditate? The basic logic is quite simple. The quality of your mind determines the quality of your life. Happiness and suffering, no matter how extreme, are mental events. The mind depends upon the body, of course, and the body upon the world. But everything good or bad that happens in your life must appear in consciousness to matter. Now, this fact offers ample opportunity to make the best of bad situations, because changing how you respond to the world is often as good as changing the world. actually seem to arrive at your destination, because most of your life is the journey. Most of your life is a process of solving problems. It is not and never will be the condition of basking in the absence of all problems. You will always have something to do. So the frame of mind in which you do these things will determine the quality of your life. Above all, there's one mistake you cannot afford to make. You can't wait until you solve your problems to be happy.
You just calm.